In this video, I'm going to describe the use of the URLMonitor class. This class allows you to monitor the availability of a resource that you communicate with over HTTP or HTTPS. For the demonstrations in this chapter, I'll be using a Flex project that's available in the Exercises area. If you're following along with the exercises, you can import the project. Go to the Flex Builder menu and select File, Import, Flex Project. Click the Browse button next to Archive File. Navigate to the Chapter 08 folder in the Exercises area and select Chapter 08 Begin Project.zip. Then, when you come back to Import Flex Project, click Finish. Go to the Flex Navigator view and open the project and open its source folder, and then open the application using URLMonitor.mxml. This application has two embedded graphics, named Available Indicator and Not Available Indicator. These graphics will be used to display the availability of network resources at runtime. At the bottom of the application, there's an image component whose source property is bound to the Not Available Image icon, and a label control with an ID of Status Label. When you start up the application initially, it simply displays the Not Available Indicator graphic and a message checking URL status. Close the application and return to the code, and then place your cursor above the init method. The first step in network monitoring is to create an instance of a monitor object. In this case, I'll use the URLMonitor class. Declare a private variable, name it monitor, and data type it as URLMonitor. Now move the cursor into the init method. Now I'll instantiate the variable using the URLMonitor class's constructor method. This constructor method requires an instance of the URL request object. So I'll add new URL request, and then I'll pass into that constructor method the actual location of the resource I want to monitor. In this case, I'm going to use http://localhost. That is a service that's available on my local system. Next, I'll start the monitor. Now, as the monitor starts up, it's going to send out an initial request to this location. When the response comes back, it will determine whether it got back a valid response. And at that point, it's going to dispatch an event named status. So now, before I start the monitor, I'll add an event listener. I'll make a little bit of space before the call to the start method and add this code. Monitor.addEventListener, and I'll select the constant statusEvent.status to represent the status event. Then I'll react by calling an event listener function that I'll need to create, named statusHandler. Now create that function. Place the cursor after the init method and create another new function. Name this one statusHandler. As with all event handler functions, this will receive an event argument, and this one will be data typed as statusEvent. The function returns void, and initially all we're going to do is trace the current availability of the network resource, like this. I'll put in a literal string of available, then I'll concatenate it to event.target.available. The available property is a member of the URLMonitor class, and it's a Boolean value that indicates whether the monitored resource is currently available. I'll save my changes and run the application. Now notice initially that I haven't started up my web server. If in fact you have WAMP or MAMP or any other web server currently running on the standard port 80 on your local machine, turn it off before this test. Now I'll run the application in debug mode. As the application starts up, it sends out an initial ping. And notice in the console view at the bottom of Flex Builder that I get back a message available false. Now I'm going to close the application and I'm going to start up my web server. If you're working on Windows and you followed the earlier instructions in this video series, you installed a product named WAMP. And if you're working on Mac, you might have installed MAMP. Go ahead and start up that server now. On Windows Vista, I'll go into the Start menu and type WAMP, and locate the menu choice Start WAMP Server. I'll wait for a few moments until the server is started, and I'll be able to tell on Windows that the server is completely started by looking at the system tray icon in the lower right-hand corner. I should see that the indicator needle is all the way to the right, and if I move the cursor over the icon, I get a tooltip server online. Now I'll run the application again, once again in debug mode. I'll wait a moment, and this time I get back a message, available true. Okay, now I'm going to add some logic to the status handler function to manipulate the visual interface of the application. I've closed down the application. And now I'll go to the status handler method, and I'll add a conditional clause. If event.target.available. And now I'm going to make two changes to the interface. First, I'll set the imageindicator.source property to the bound available image object. That's the embedded graphic to represent availability. And I'll change statuslabel.text to network available. And in the else clause, I'll set imageindicator.source to not available image. And once again, modify the status label's text property. And I'll put in the string network not available. I'll save the changes and run the application, noting this time that the WAMP server is running. Notice as the application starts up, initially it says it's checking the URL, and then it reports network available. I'll close the application. Now I'll go down to the WAMP server and turn off the services. You can do the same thing in the MAMP server if that's what you're using. For WAMP, I'll click on the icon in the system tray and select Stop All Services. Then I'll wait a moment for the service to shut down. Then I'll run the application again. And after a few seconds, you'll see the message Network Not Available. Now in the next video, I'll show you how to set the polling interval so that you can control how often you're rechecking network availability.